The cockpit's digital pulse didn't flatline with a mechanical groan. It vanished into a void of deliberate high-level encryption. As the flight displays bled to black, Captain Elias Thorne realized too late that the quiet men he just exiled from his cabin weren't mere passengers, they were the architects of the very gravity. Holding his career together, the air inside the airport was a thick, stagnant soup of jet fuel fumes. And the quiet desperation of 400 travelers, caught in the limbo of a Geneva-bound red eye. In the center of the frantic Terminal 2, figures stood like obsidian pillars. Against the tide of rushing commuters, Julian and Silas Vane did not look like men who belonged to the chaos of a public concourse. Dressed in tailored charcoal wool, they moved with a synchronized, predatory grace that seemed to push the air out of the room. To the average traveler, they might have been high-stakes financiers, or perhaps reclusive architects. However, to the invisible layers of global aviation authority, they were known simply as the Sentinels. They didn't come to fix engines, they came to measure the integrity of the souls tasked with operating them. Their employer, Apex Global, was currently standing on the precipice of a Tier 1 security clearance, a golden ticket that would unlock billions in government transport contracts. The Vanes were the final filter. They weren't interested in the torque of a bolt or the pressure in a hydraulic line. They were hunting for a much more dangerous defect, the rod of human arrogance. The check-in lead spent 12 minutes scrolling through a personal feed. While the queue reached 42 passengers, Julian noted his voice, a low-frequency hum that seemed to resonate in the floorboards. He wasn't looking at a device, he was absorbing the friction of the system. Silas tapped a secure obsidian glass tablet with a gloved finger. The gate supervisor failed to notice the erratic movement of a ground technician. In Zone B.4. Deduction for situational blindness. The rot is top-down. They were the last aboard, stepping onto the aircraft not as guests, but as auditors of a reality the crew didn't yet realize was under scrutiny. The first-class cabin was a sterile cathedral of ivory, leather, and forced serenity. Occupying seat 1A was Evelyn Sterling, a woman whose massive shipping fortune had convinced her that the laws of physics and social conduct were merely suggestions for the less fortunate. To her, the arrival of the Vane brothers wasn't a matter of security. It was an aesthetic offense. They occupied too much space. They carried an aura of unvoted authority that she found personally insulting. "This cabin feels heavy," Evelyn remarked, her voice a sharpened blade wrapped in fine silk. She didn't look at the brothers. She stared at her own reflection in a glass of vintage crystal Marcus. The chief purser appeared as if summoned by a silent alarm. Having spent 20 years refining the art of the subservient bow, he knew exactly who Mrs. Sterling was, and more importantly, he knew the size of the discretionary donation her family had recently made to the airline's executive board. "Is there an issue, Mrs. Sterling?" Marcus inquired, his voice dripping with practiced concern. "These two," she whispered, a performance of fragile distress that had been honed in boardrooms and divorce courts alike. "They are intimidating. I feel a profound sense of psychological unease. I simply cannot be expected to endure an 8-hour flight with such an oppressive presence beside me." Marcus turned to the Vanes. They sat in perfect, terrifying stillness. Their hands were folded. Their eyes were neutral. They hadn't spoken a word to her yet. Marcus saw only a billionaire's discomfort and the potential for a career-ending complaint. He didn't ask for their credentials. He didn't consider the manifest. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice hardening with a brittle false authority, "I'm going to have to ask you to step back onto the jet bridge while we settle a seating dispute." "There is no dispute regarding seats," Silas replied, his eyes like polished flint. "There is only a dispute regarding character. We suggest you return to your pre-flight duties and allow the scheduled departure to proceed." The tension escalated until the cockpit door swung open. Captain Elias Thorne stepped out, his 4 gold stripes catching the cabin light. He was a man of immense experience, but tonight he was tired, frustrated by the storm and desperate to keep the flight on schedule, to please his corporate masters. "This is my deck," Thorne growled, his voice rasping with fatigue. "If my lead purser says you're a disruption, then you're a disruption. I'm not risking a mid-air incident because you two want to play the silent and tough routine. Get off my aircraft now." Julian stood slowly, his height casting a long, narrow shadow over the captain. "You are making a tactical decision based on the convenience
Captain
of a lie.
Thorne,
You are choosing to appease a shadow, rather than uphold the integrity of your own cabin. That is a very dangerous way to navigate the sky. Save the philosophy for the lounge." Thorne snapped, "Move now." The Vanes collected their briefcases with a clinical lack of emotion. As they crossed the threshold of the door, Evelyn Sterling offered a small, triumphant toast with her crystal flute. The heavy door hissed shut, the seal engaging with a metallic finality that sounded like a gavel. Hitting a block, the massive Boeing 787 began its slow, lumbering crawl toward the runway, its engines spooling into a low-frequency roar that vibrated through the floor. Inside the cockpit, Thorne checked his watch, a sense of relief washing over him as the terminal faded into the rain. Then the world went dark one by one. The primary flight displays, the literal eyes of the aircraft, flickered and dyed the glass cockpit. Usually a vibrant tapestry of data, altitude and heading transformed into a series of blank, mocking mirrors. The radio didn't static. It emitted a single high-pitched encryption tone before a cold, synthesized voice overrode the internal comms. Apex 7 White 7 cease all movement immediately. The voice echoed through Thorne's headset. Systemic override initiated under Sentinel Mandate 9. Your command authority is hereby revoked. Grounding protocol is in effect. Outside, the storm-lashed tarmac was suddenly illuminated by a strobe of blue and red. Federal enforcement vehicles didn't approach the gate. They swarmed the aircraft on the taxiway, surrounding the multi-million-dollar machine like a pack of wolves circling a wounded beast. In the executive lounge, Arthur Vance, the CEO of Apex Global, was already facing the music. He had been intercepted by the Vanes. Within 3 minutes of their deplaning, he stood before them, now his face the color of wet parchment. It was a misunderstanding. Arthur stammered, his hands shaking. A stressed crew making a snap judgment in a storm. We can fix this. An aircraft is a closed system. Arthur Julian said, taking a slow sip of room-temperature water. If the leadership within that system allows the loudest, most entitled voice to dictate reality over the facts of the manifest, the system is fundamentally compromised. Your captain chose to sell his judgment for the sake of a quiet cabin. But the Tier 1 contract, the contract is void. Silas interrupted, his voice final today. Your captain proved that his command can be bought with a complaint. In our world, that isn't a personality quirk. It's a crash waiting to happen. As the confused and angry passengers were ushered off the plane under the watchful eyes of federal agents, a specialized team of independent inspectors, acting on a direct order from Silas, climbed into the wheel well of the 787. What they found through the use of ultrasonic sensors sent a chill through the investigative board. In his rush to clear the disruption and make up for the lost time caused by the ego-driven confrontation, Captain Thorne had performed a perfunctory, rushed walk-around. Deep within the high-pressure fuel line was a hairline fracture, invisible to the naked eye and bypassed by the automated sensors. In their current cycle, had the plane reached cruising altitude, the sustained vibration of the engines would have turned that microscopic crack into a blowtorch. The aircraft wouldn't have just crashed, it would have vaporized over the Atlantic. The Vane brothers didn't stay to hear the apologies or the frantic legal maneuvering of Apex Global. They were already in the back of a nondescript sedan, moving through the rain toward a different terminal, a different city, and another cockpit where an ego,